having to get away from those repetitive thoughts and having to form new ones is a really difficult process. And I think the part of that becomes kind of really hopeful for us is that you are able to rewire new pathways, you are able to develop new behaviors, but it does take the acknowledgement of the behavior and the practice repeatedly to fire new pathways to the person that you want to be. Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Kelsey.
Welcome back to another week, guys. I'm Rachel. We're so happy to have you back. And what's happening this week? What's
going on? What's going on in the world? What's going on in life? What's happening?
What are the feels? What are we doing? What are we feeling? What's happening, Kelsey?
Well, I'll tell you about my life. I'm just doing a bunch of things. I'm moving right now. I'm pregnant. There's a lot going on right now, but all exciting change things. I did want to mention, a couple people had asked me on my Instagram to elaborate, and hopefully I can get this right because there was a bunch of questions, but I didn't have it right in the top of my mind. But to elaborate on, I had said something on my Instagram when I talked about like workouts and some of the pelvic floor things that I've been doing. And one of the phrases that I've been using is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And someone kind of asked me to explain that because I think a lot of, and this doesn't just apply to pregnancy, I know this has happened with a lot of injuries or, any type of like recovery things, but I think it's particularly prevalent with pregnancy because they're kind of like overall thing is like whatever feels good as long as you can keep doing it. But for me, that was an ineffective saying because there's a lot of things that I could do that I kind of felt like wary about with pulling back in the gym. So I thought it would be nice to address that for a lot of people. Some of the things that I personally have pulled back on that I could still physically do, but don't feel comfortable doing is things like toes to bar. I completely cut out because there's a lot of pressure in the middle. But I think that for a lot of people, when you hear like, if you can, keep doing it, but you really know your body. How many times do we have to say this in the podcast? You really are the person that's living in your body, living in your home, and you know. And some things just feel like, I don't think I should be doing that. There may be some other steps where I could get something that could, an effective stimulus from this that would be better for me personally. So I just wanted to chat about that for a minute.
Well, that's great. I know you also said, just to give a couple more examples, I know that you also said that you weren't jumping onto the box anymore, that you've moved to step up simply because, not because you can't physically jump onto the box anymore, but just because that made you feel uncomfortable and wary and you just didn't like the way it felt. For me personally, maybe this was a little bit biased, but I cut out running pretty early.
So my coach had asked me recently, "Are you still running?" I said, "Yeah, feels good." but I could definitely see you being like,
Well, the thing about you cutting out like box jumps and toes bar and stuff is like, okay, I know that's for real that you don't, because you like those movements. And so
I
it's for
do.
real that you don't feel good. But sometimes I did. Oh, you know what? Running feels uncomfortable for me. They were like, yeah, but running felt uncomfortable before you were pregnant. And I was like, yeah.
You're right, but now it really feels uncomfortable.
I just don't
I
like
do
it.
understand what you could have been feeling too about the pressure though, because I had gone through like a not a phase, but with some running, there baby moved lower. And then after the workout, I sat with my feet up to kind of shift back into a more comfortable position because I was like, dude, you're sitting on my hip
My
bones.
bladder.
Yeah.
Get off
I'm
my
like,
bladder.
"Ugh." But
Yeah.
with like some of those jumping things, it's just like down, down. And you're like, we're going to shift back up because that doesn't feel good.
Okay, well, thanks for backing me up on the running, but
Yeah,
I'm pretty
that's
sure
true.
it was, by choice.
It was my choice. Well, it's
I
you
was
know,
just
it's
looking for a reason to cut that out. I was like, "You know what? I really love fitness, but I should get pregnant so I could do less running."
that's
That would be
right.
great.
I
I could
think
totally
it's a
justify it.
really this is one of those things where comparison's always out there, and especially in uncertain times, you kind of look out there for like what should I be doing? I think a lot of people can relate to this no matter what part of your fitness journey or life journey you're in, transitional period. You look for someone who has kind of been doing the same thing. Ultimately, you look for someone who is killing it in that thing, posting about it, and then you're like, now I feel shameful. Like,
Why did I do this?
because
Again.
comparison, right? Like, oh, I want to make my house better. I'm going to watch like the people who just own this shit and then be like, well, I'm just not good at this.
Wow.
And I think the same thing, happens with fitness. When we first start out on our fitness journey, we're like, what do we do? What do we do in the gym? What are these people doing? And we go to the people who are doing it like quote unquote perfect. Like, I should do that. And then if we can't do that, we feel shameful about it. And I know this has happened, with pregnancy. You kind of look at it, you're like, what movement should I be doing? What can I be? And you see people that continue doing it and you're like, wow, are they killing it? And I'm just not. Like, am I like just not as good? And I've really had some pep talks with self about this, but it was practiced long before I got pregnant because I was like, their journey has nothing to do with mine. I'm in a different body. This is my journey. This is my thing. I'm going to own it. And if this part feels uncomfortable, like, a lot of people said I stopped climbing the rope. I feel totally confident climbing the rope. I feel very good. I feel very secure. Switched my wrap, like how I climb the rope, but I feel super good. That stays. But some other things that maybe people were doing longer didn't feel great for me. And shamelessly, I will cut that out because their journey has nothing to do with me.
But it's taken a lot of practice on
Yes.
non-pregnancy things, and that's why, we're always trying to practice the type of people that we want to be every single day and embody the qualities that we admire, is because, if you want to have the strength to do that in an uncertain time where you're going to be tested, it has to have been practiced on less important things.
Yeah. You
um
said you put that so you said that so well
Oh,
because like it really just has to be practiced. Then when you get to the uncertain times, you feel less uncertain. You feel more confident in how you can move forward because you're like, I practice this all the time with other things. This might be something new, but it doesn't change my response to how I handle things. I think it's a great segue into our topic today too.
ooh, it really is. Today's topic made me rethink my life. I'm starting over. I'm
That's great because we're all in a transition period every 5 to 7 years. New
Holy
self.
shit. I am throwing myself out and buying a new one. It's about time. She was getting old anyways. Um Today, doing the research on today's topic was so mind-blowing that I feel like I have to scream it from the rooftops. And that happens, to us often. That's why we have this platform. But this one, I think I'm just going to give like my, I always do this. I did this on Water Talk too. I'm like, all right, we're here to ruin the fun. But like this one, your immediate response to this might be defensive. And I just want you to know that so was mine. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that like this isn't for you, it means that, like, that's a very normal and typical way to respond to this topic. So if you get your back up a little bit, when we're first starting to talk about this, I think I just wanna put out there that you good, girl. You good. Hang in there, keep on listening, because I think, like I did, you are gonna have a life-changing, mind-blowing experience and want to just throw out your old life.
I think you're 100% on point with that. Um, Almost every person that I've kind of brought up this topic to in different ways has had a knee jerk defensive reaction. And I really think that anytime I have a knee jerk defensive reaction, I have thought to myself, like, this is an opportunity for growth, because if you feel that strongly about this in any way, then you have an opportunity here.
And
So
it's something you need to pay attention to
that's
because it's like,
100%. It
"Ooh,
comes to the front of
that
your
struck a
mind.
nerve.
Yeah,
Why did
and,
that
like,
strike
why
a
did that
nerve?"
strike a nerve? Because
Yeah.
I wanna know why, and I think that if you're
Mhm.
listening to this podcast, you're someone who is looking to better yourselves in one way or the other, to live a happier, healthier life is what we're talking about all the time, but you are really looking for the tools in your toolbox to help you in different facets of your life. And this is a really big one, because in my mind, this controls a lot of the things that we do. It controls our perception with a lot of the interactions that we have. And ultimately, it has a big impact on the energy that you bring into a room. And for me, that's very important. I think it's really important, not just like in a conference room. I mean, like in your house, in your relationships, and that the energy that you bring in has a big impact on the energy that you get back. And that ultimately is part of living our best life. How can we interact with others? How can we interact with ourselves? How can we interact with the world? So, we're going to talk about venting and complaining today. And not just in a way of, hey, do this, don't do this, but we're going to talk to you about some science behind these behaviors and how these neural pathways are formed in your brain. Because I don't want you to feel, if you hear some of the examples, I don't want you to feel shameful that you're like, "Ugh, that's me." I want you to feel an opportunity for growth and understand that when we practice these neural pathways so many times, and when we're surrounded by some of these things for so long, that is immediately where our brain is going to want to go. And in order to change that behavior, it's going to take some work, it's going to take some self reflection, and it's going to take some time.
If you can get down with that, um, I will just come out with the admission that I am a massive venter. I I'm a professional venter, I like to say. I can vent like no one else, like no one's business. And when I was thinking about my venting, it's never situational. I never am like, oh, this situation. It's always human behavior. I vent about human behavior. And this I think is rooted in some tendencies of being a controlling person, that when people don't act the way I want them to act, when they don't make the decisions I was hoping they would make, when they don't um, do it the way I would have done it, I get like I have a certain type of feeling and I tend to vent a lot about other people. And
Mhm.
you can call it whatever you want. You can call it venting. You can call it complaining. It's essentially the same thing. I think complaining has a little bit more of a negative connotation. So we'll use vent if that helps you. But essentially, it's just complaining. And on average, people
Venting is a
complain.
nice friendly way.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Venting has been given like a place in the health.
A pass.
It's like, yeah, it's like, oh, if you can vent and let it out, that's a healthy behavior. And we're going to challenge that today with some neuroscience that like There's no evidence to back that up whatsoever scientifically, and in fact, there's evidence to the contrary. So it just needs to be something that maybe we stop bucketing in the health, the mental health, like, package of, like, venting is part of it. Um, Complaining or venting, on average, people do about 15 to 30 times a day, which if you replace that behavior with anything else, or if you replace that behavior, like you put the word practice in there. So instead of saying like I vent 15 to 30 times a day, you say like I practice venting 15 to 30 times a day. Now I want you to think of the other things that you practice 15 to 30 times a day. It's a
Yeah,
short list.
it's a short. Um I was just gonna reiterate that's per day. That's a lot, and that's the average person, which is why I really want not no one to feel attacked. 'Cause you're gonna feel what you're gonna feel, and that's totally valid. Feel your feels,
Feel them.
feel your feels. But I just want you to know that like that is on average for people globally. So a lot of us are practicing this behavior repeatedly, and the number of things that we practice that many times in a day, man, you're right. That is the very short list. You don't even brush your teeth that many times in a day.
You don't even eat that many times a day. Like, think of, well,
Me?
15 to 30?
No, I'm just
My
kidding.
god.
Like little snacks.
No, but I it's just a snack.
Like a
It's a
couple
pre-snack.
blueberries.
So, it's a post-snack snack. My god.
Second
Second
breakfast.
breakfast. I knew you were gonna say that. No, but I just think when we consider replacing and putting in the word practice, because essentially all behaviors are being practiced all day. If you think about laughter as a behavior and you say I practice laughing x amount of times per day, on average the amount of times people practice laughter and people practice complaining or venting doesn't even, it's not even in the same realm.
It's not even close. I actually had looked up not while we were talking about this specific topic, but in comparison, how many people typically laugh or practice laughter on a daily basis. Adults, I was looking at it for adults, for children, and just the number was so low. I made me sad because we were my partner and I were talking about how kids run everywhere. You watch them do it. They get up from the couch, they just run over, they just run back here, and you just like see them like scooting around, and you're like, when did we stop doing that? Like, not that I think you guys should have to like get up and run everywhere you go, but sometimes it's hard to get people to get up, and like with kids, you just run everywhere until they become like kind of socially aware that that's a little bit weird, and they stop doing it. But a lot of that behavior is the same thing with laughter, where adults tend to not practice laughing or like a good laugh, not even like not your fake giggle with your coworker or that
Not that one.
stupid guy in the grocery line behind you and you're just like not that one,
Yeah.
like real laughter. And it's just like we are practicing these things, and people who tend to laugh more or have a higher, their happiness, their reported happiness, their how they experience joy is typically higher. It's always higher. Because they're just practicing laughing all the time. They're easier to laugh because it's already warmed up, right?
It's so think of that with every single behavior. You are more likely to do X because it's already warmed up. Now we're going to talk about the actual science behind how this warming up happens. But I know that you've been called multiple times an easy laugh, and people think that like that's like a, huh, you were born that way, huh? You're just an easy laugh. And it's like that's a practice behavior.
Mm.
You have practiced, and whether or not it was a masking technique, or you can look at all the different reasons for why you have practiced behavior. Some of them are embedded in trauma, some of them are embedded in like personality traits you learn from your siblings, from parents. But essentially, if you look at your most common personality traits, it's simply the most practiced. And when we can take a hold of like our idea of our self and who we are and say like I do have a significant role to play here because I am essentially practicing every day who I want to be. That's a that's a big responsibility. That always like shakes me up because I'm just like, "Oh, man, but
Yeah.
like I got to wash my hair too.
I know. I
Everybody
know.
has to eat." But like, okay, I want to go into some of the science behind this because essentially this isn't our opinion. There's all kinds of brain scans and scientific evidence to back this up, and I think the majority of people actually are familiar with these concepts because they have become so mainstream about neurons that fire together and wire together. But essentially what
We got
is
a nice
happening,
rhyme to remind us how neurons work, and I
right?
really love that for us science.
I love that for us non-science people because 'cause I'm like,
Yeah.
"Make it rhyme." I'm
Yeah.
not gonna remember it if you don't make it rhyme. But whether a behavior is perceived as positive or negative, this doesn't really matter. This happens the same way in your brain. So just understand that this goes for both. I just wanna put that out there. When your brain starts to recognize a behavior as frequent, it deepens the neurological pathways that make this like easier to recognize for the brain, because essentially your brain is always looking for the easiest and fastest path to the end, like to the means. So we're trying to like our brain is always trying to maximize what we're doing to make it the fastest and easiest, burn less calories, all of that. And that's just a survival mechanism. So your brain can actually rewire itself based on the thoughts that you practice consistently. So that way it can get to them easier. And that's what we mean when we say like synapses or neurons that fire together, wire together, because there's actual bridges and pathways that are being formed to make that easier so that your brain doesn't have to do as much work to think that thought again or to solve that problem again or to react to that situation again.
And this serves us in many ways. It serves us in ways that with behaviors that we would like to repeat, and the ways that we develop our personality by repeating some of the same things. And with addiction, I know that a lot of people have brought up this ways that addiction is formed is the same way. You do have people who do have an addiction are thinking about their addictive behavior more often because it has been wired in that way. So you are constantly thinking about whatever the type of addiction that you have been struggling with, constantly thinking about those, and having to rewire that is a really difficult process, right? Like having to get away from those repetitive thoughts and having to form new ones is a really difficult process. And I think the part of that that becomes kind of really hopeful for us is that you are able to rewire new pathways. You are able to develop new behaviors, but it does take the practice repeatedly, the acknowledgement of the behavior and the practice repeatedly to fire new pathways to the person that you want to be. You have to shovel the road.
You have to I love always the analogy when I'm explaining like this to my son or like when I'm explaining it to like a younger child. I always use the path example. Like it snowed and that's, your brain before you've done any improvement or damage to it. And it's all just pristine and white and slowly pathways start to be shoveled. And the ones that you shovel more, even though more snow keeps falling every hour, they stay clearer. And the ones that you don't, the snow keeps building up and it's harder and harder to shovel those as as time goes on. So it's I
I
just Oh,
Environment
sorry.
plays a major factor in this too,
Yeah.
because when you think about some of those pathways that have been formed, you think about your entire life, you think about what you've been surrounded with, your traumatic events, what has been my historical response to anger, what has been my historical response to this type of thing and this type of feeling or experience. And some of those pathways have been developed when you were children. So that when you get to be an adult, you have these behaviors that maybe are now undesirable, that you have a better understanding. And you say, like, well, I don't love the way that I do that. Can I change it? The answer is yes. It takes some work, but the answer is yes, because we can figure out new behaviors. We can figure out different ways to react when we feel anger or sadness, or when we respond to someone in a different way. But your environment has played a significant role in that. And I kind of wanted to talk about like the people you surround yourself, the conversations that you have, and the type of venting, not even the type of venting. When we're talking about venting, we are going to talk about not necessarily you venting, but listening to someone vent has a significant effect on your brain. Not just like, oh, this isn't going to affect me. I know that I've done that. I'm like, I'm just putting up my wall. This isn't going to affect me. No, no matter what, our brain is wired for types of empathy where we look to connect with someone. So, someone is experiencing anger or sadness. This is a great feature of our brain, is that we look to connect with them in different ways. So, we look to feel the sadness or the anger that they're experiencing, which is a great form of empathy. But when it comes to some of these other things where someone is complaining or venting, and we're looking to associate, we're looking to connect with them, our brain is taking in that same information and firing those same pathways, even though it's not even coming out of your mouth.
Dude, my brain is so good at this. I
You are really
constantly
good at this because you
my I must
you've
have the
said
most
stories when
empathetic.
you haven't even been there.
This is okay, this is the exact example I was gonna use. I've been told by multiple scientists that brains have a very difficult time telling the difference between an experience that they were there or that they were told. And I bet a bunch of people
This
can,
is secondhand trauma. This is like there's a ton of science behind this, especially with people who like therapists or social workers who are experiencing types of trauma on a daily basis, and they're not able to differentiate what is actually happening to them and what has been told to them, because secondhand trauma is extremely powerful. Your brain thinks the experience is happening to you.
okay. So my brain does this times a million where I will tell stories and I will say, yeah, remember that time we were doing this thing? And you'll say, Mark will say, people will say to me, you weren't, yeah, but you weren't there.
You weren't even there.
No, no, you weren't there, Rachel. And I'm like, yeah, no, no, I was. I remember. And I tell it in the exact detail. And they're like, huh, that is exactly right. You were clearly listening to the story, but you weren't there. And every time I could have sworn that I was there, physically, my actual self. And it is because the story has been
She's
relayed
plopped
to me.
herself right in the
I
story.
popped myself right in there. I was like in the back of the car. I was like, yeah, I can even envision where I was sitting. Like, I
I'm telling you guys,
know
this
I was
before she even
there
said this, like I knew this because she's done this so many times.
so many
Where I'm sitting there,
times.
I'm like, I don't think you were there.
And I they can show me evidence that I was not there. And I still have such a hard time because the way that it was relayed to me, I inserted myself. Maybe that's like extremely like what am I? Like a narcissist or something, but
Narcissistic.
I put myself right in there and I experienced it with them and all the feels and so much so that I think it happened to me.
You could look at that in two ways, though. It could be like extremely narcissistic, or you could look at that as being so empathetic that you hear someone's feelings and their experiences and you put yourself in there, which is a really strong, like we always want we teach children to do this. Like you don't hit other people because you don't want them to hit you. Like you want the people to feel empathy for others. Like maybe you feel a lot of empathy.
I mean, all the people that have that experience are like, yeah, that's a gift and a curse.
Yeah.
But so when we're talking about complaining or venting or witnessing complaining and venting, understand that there is science to support the fact that it shrinks your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus is the part of your brain that's responsible for learning, problem solving, emotions, and forming new memories. Your brain is like, think of it like Play-Doh. Like it molds, it changes like over the years. Like you do brain scans of a person at 20 and brain scans of them at 45, and their brain looks different. That's because it is constantly evolving and changing, like we said with those neural pathways. But you can physically shrink the size of one of the most important centers in your brain emotionally simply by hearing constant complaining or doing constant complaining. And that for me was just so wild because the size of your hypothalamus has a direct correlation to your lifespan. So if you are constantly shrinking your hypothalamus, and we know that like complaining is contributing to this, your likeliness of early death goes up in all modalities, which is like, what? So when
Well, I
we talk
just
about on the podcast having a healthier, happier life and like, and how mental health plays a role in that, I just felt like we can't continue to ignore venting and complaining and call those healthy behaviors when everything in science says that they're not.
mm. Yeah, I honestly just wanted that to sit for a second because in any other aspect of your life, when you're saying like this behavior is causing this part of my brain to shrink and it makes me not as good of a problem solver, it makes me not as good of a learner, like I am immediately like, what? But in every aspect, that very much makes sense to me. And just from and this is just going to be from my personal experience, when I have had conversations with people that I feel like are are big venters, they go in the vent and they say like, I just need to vent right now, and I understand like I'm not the best person to do that with, and I have acknowledged that and have said like I'm just trying to listen because I love problem solving. I love to move there. I love to go there. Like, how can I help you figure out a way that we could solve this problem for you so that you feel better in your life? What is the way that we could do that? And I have very much noticed that the people that I have experienced throughout my life who are big venters have a really hard time, an elongated time, or maybe never, a really difficult time moving to problem solving. It's almost like you
So
wait and you wait and you wait and you're like, are we there yet? Are we at the problem solving? And then you come up with solutions for them, with them, trying to, and they have a really difficult time even accepting trying some of the solutions because they're not in a growth mindset. They're not able to problem solve as easily. And this just really makes sense for me when you think about the fact that like that part of their brain has shrunk.
the physical size of it is actually smaller, and therefore it is less likely to be able to handle the load of, let's say, problem solving and what that brings to your brain. And that brings me to my next one, because the sort of issues and scientific proof that goes behind the issues of venting and complaining. This promotes inaction. And I one of the studies that I was looking at just gave this like perfect scenario, because it was just like, this is I found myself very much identifying with this. 95% of consumers who have had a problem with a product don't complain to the company, but they tell their complaint to 8 to 16 people. 95%. That is such an, for me, that's such an obvious, I'm venting just to vent. I'm complaining just to complain. I have no goal. I will take no action on this. I just want to hear myself complaining, and not once, 8 to 16 times. And I always have that a little bit of a problem with that, because I'm like you, I'm very quick to like, okay, heard it. Okay, but now can we, that's why I always have to ask, are we venting or are we problem solving? Because I will skip right over the venting and try immediately to push the person into problem solving. And I've found that that has a negative effect on some of my relationships because people don't feel heard. But if you go back to the times where like you're like, wow, I got that off my chest. Whew, yeah. Do you act after that?
Mm.
And is the feeling actually relief? Because if you're venting the story to more than one person, did you experience relief and like, it's off my chest now so I can move on? Because we almost always verbalize the issue, but don't actually get to the root cause of the issue or the behaviors we can put in place to react differently the next time. We almost always end it with verbalization of the event. Like, whew, I said it now. Which is okay. And we're going to talk about the ways in which you can vent in a way that is productive and not damaging to your brain. But like, just understand that that alone is kind of promoting you to not act, because your action on it was the venting. And so we're not taking steps forward to prevent that behavior next time. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to circle back when we're talking about venting, because that doesn't mean that we're not talking about issues or a problem. And that doesn't mean we're not problem solving them. So I don't want you to think like, oh, I just can't even vent about my partner because like I have to just keep it all in. There's a solution here that will actually make you feel better and be like that will contribute to growth and health in your relationships, that doesn't involve talking poorly or venting necessarily about a person, and it also doesn't involve bottling up the things that you're feeling and then just not saying them, because that's not the two roads. It's not like I either vent or I don't say anything and bottle it all up. Like that's not it. That's not it either. It's not those two roads. There are ways that we can see a problem, speak about what the problem is, and find solutions. But it has to be a mindset shift into wanting to find the solution and not to just complain. Fall is here, or it's coming, but we have the most amazing fall fall collection coming your way.
If you are as basic of a bitch as I am, please come check out our fall collections. The shirts are hilarious. The leggings are just so seasonally appropriate, and you are going to belong perfectly in the pumpkin patch among the fall leaves. It's like a photo op dream. You've got to check out our fall patterns. Constantlyvariedgear.com. I think we are probably a generation that the reason why venting has come into the health space as some kind of a positive thing is
You're right.
you know, we
I know where
we
you're
were
going.
yeah, we were told that, you're a kid, shut up, no one cares, don't speak when the adults are speaking, you don't have an opinion, because I said so. This is the generation in which, we were parented. We're seen, not heard. And I think that has, sort of a lasting effect on the way that you see yourself and the way that you problem solve. Um, and I also think that it's it's really hard to come from that and then not have an explosion of like, I'm going to
Yes,
tell everyone every feeling I've ever had.
for
Now that
sure.
I'm out of that, I'm going to let them all know. And it's never been about the fact that you should be bottling up as opposed to letting it out. It's never been about that. Not one single bit. And I just want everyone to know that releasing emotions is always something that we've promoted on this podcast. And we have never had the mindset of like, you know, you're going to be the psychopath that's happy all the time. And if you get a feeling of sadness, you're just going to push that right down and be like, yeah, but I'm actually happy. That's not what this episode is about. And it's not what we are promoting when we say watch your venting.
Yeah, because feel
But
your feels.
because
This has
feel that's
been
our thing.
historically a thing is to feel your feels. But some of the language that I really that I've practiced, so I wanted to share some of it with you guys when it comes to like a complaint or especially within a relationship, venting. When we're so say we're venting, we're not venting to the person that we're in the relationship with, the person that we have a problem. We're not solving it anyway, right? We're just kind of like just complaining because you're not solving it unless you're speaking to the person that you need the behavior to change with. But when we do this venting thing, we're relinquishing ourselves of all of our responsibility within that relationship to heal it.
That's why we
And
don't act.
that's why we don't act. It's just like, oh, it's a them problem. Like it's all them. And like the reality is that if you're interacting with any of these people or yourself within your life, is that you have a responsibility to act within that relationship. You have a responsibility to set healthy boundaries. You have a responsibility to tell people when they hurt your feelings. And some of the things that, you know, I have adjusted in my relationship that we've acknowledged is when you say you hurt my feelings by the thing that you did, it creates this. It has in my relationship anyway. It has created this. Everyone has their backup because you started with you did this thing. So just
Well,
a
it's an
small.
accusation.
It's an
There's
accusation,
no other way
and
to
even
take it.
if it's true,
Even if it's
um,
true, it's still an
it's still
accusation.
an accusation. The adjustments that we made is starting with my feelings are really hurt when you do this behavior. So we start with how I feel, how I feel in this situation, because ultimately that's the only thing that I can control. And it takes the immediate accusation out of it because I'm saying how I feel, but I'm still addressing that your behavior is causing these feelings for me. So how might we be able to adjust that together so that we can figure it out? Because that is actually where we're in the problem solving. Because if you're constantly just complaining about another person, they're continuing to keep in your life, it's like, what's the point here? And why are we so comfortable relinquishing all of that control and all of that power and every part that we play in creating healthy boundaries and telling people how we feel and allowing them to hear how we feel or how we feel about their behavior and how it affects us? Why are we so comfortable just tearing them down, essentially, in order to make ourselves feel not better? so
Nope.
so like you could go it in a selfish or unselfish way, whatever makes you feel better, but like neither of those are actually solving your problem, making you feel better. Venting is not making you feel better, and it's not making the other person feel better.
And there's no action
And there's no
in that.
action.
There's no there so we're relinquishing all of our power to then be able to not act so that their behavior can create a pattern so that every single time we feel X, then Y happens. And that's where you have to get into you know, the okay, so we have outlined some of the most negative effects that venting and complaining have on your psyche and your brain. I do just want to hit on really quick the fact that there are cortisol spikes as well when you vent and complain. It's a natural thing for the human body, and I know people are really on to cortisol right now. They're like
Yeah.
on to like I need to control my levels, and I need to and just
Because it's the
understand.
stress hormone, and we have a culture that is feeling or saying how stressed they're feeling on a daily basis. So cortisol has taken the front seat to that because it is your stress hormone. So when cortisol is released in your body, ultimately you are under some type of stress. It's
It
not always
is
bad,
the
but in this case,
no.
it's not positive.
Right. I mean, we think of this as some sort of a release where the problem is given away or relinquished or whatever. The problem goes out of our bodies, but in essence, it's replaced with cortisol, which is fight, flight, or fawn. And it is in case we need to act. We never do, we just venting. But our body thinks that we may need to act on this extreme stress that we're describing. And so, shot of cortisol. And if you tell 8 to 10 people about your experience, that's 8 to 10 shots of cortisol. And your body doesn't know the difference between you're actually experiencing that or you're retelling it. And one more thing on the behavior patterns and like when X, then Y. You always have a knee jerk reaction emotionally to almost anything. So you probably know what yours is. It's probably based on your Enneagram, mine's anger. Um, when something, I respond with anger. And it's always a perceived, inconvenience, problem, whatever. When I see traffic, I get annoyed. That's a behavior pattern. That's the snow being shoveled. That's that why I can come up with that so quickly as a knee jerk is because those neurological pathways are literally grown so close together that they're almost touching because I've practiced that so many times. That's your go-to emotion. If you find that your go-to emotion is stress, when something, I get stressed. When X, I respond this way. Here's an interesting thing. If you encounter an unfamiliar situation, one that you're not familiar with, traffic on a route that there's never traffic, or a problem that you have not previously come across in work. I've not seen this problem before. Your brain's fastest way to solve it is to go to your deepest neurological pathways. So even if it's not stressful, you perceive stress.
Yes.
So essentially, you're coming up across a work problem that you're like, I've never seen this before. You immediately go, this is stressful. And that perception can be extremely dangerous because it creates stress in things that shouldn't necessarily be just because it's familiar, because you haven't taken a bird's eye view and been like, is this actually stressful? That hasn't happened because you have a behavior pattern that's far too ingrained. And so what I want to challenge people is like, let's take traffic. If every time you see traffic, if X, then Y, I'm angry, I'm annoyed, I'm I get anxious. Every time I see traffic, I think of someone I've been meaning to call. I see the traffic and I go, oh, I really wanted to call Kelsey anyways. Yes. Every time I see traffic, oh, it's okay. There's this podcast that I never have time for on my commute to work because it's like too short. So I've been meaning to put on that podcast. Small things like this,
It's
I'm
weird
telling
because,
you.
like, I do these things and they're very funny. Like, we've hit traffic going to a Miami game once, and I said, "Oh," like Matt said, like, "Oh man, we're just gonna hit all of this bunch of traffic. 'Cause going to Miami is a lot of traffic." And he said, like, "Oh man, too bad the bright line was sold out." And I said, well, it gives us like more opportunity to talk about that, more time to talk about this thing because it's an in-depth conversation. We'll probably need the time. And sometimes he's like, I hate you.
Did you
But
just make traffic into an opportunity?
but like
I
sometimes
hate you.
when something is so practiced like that, you don't even notice you do it. Like you don't even realize it. Like it is so practiced, which is can be practiced in the other direction where like you can constantly see things as opportunities. And it makes it it makes your experience so much better. Like
So much better. It's just it makes your experience so much better. So, all right. So, we've
but I
convinced
did
you.
wanna say too, just one thing about, the perceived stress level.
Okay. I know you're hot on this right now.
When you yeah, when someone else so when we just talked about some of these conversations or people that you surround yourself with and how impactful their opinions or language can be when you're talking about a problem. When someone inserts something like that's really stressful, or they insert a feeling, maybe you don't even identify with it quite yet, but a lot of the times, if we're surrounding ourselves with people who immediately go to, well, this is an overload or this is super stressful, we fall in the same direction. That's when our pathways start to form in those same ways. And now we've perceived an event as stressful, which we may not even have gotten there yet.
I do
And
this all the time. I do this all the time.
yeah.
Oh, we're stressed about it? Okay. This is
Okay.
why I was at the party that I wasn't actually at. This is because I'm like, yeah,
Right.
okay.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Yeah, I should be stressed about this. You're
Yeah.
right.
You're right. And
I
sometimes
want to feel your feels.
I wanna feel your feels. And sometimes it's like if you're telling a story or telling an experience, so, people can really have a big impact on how your brain is going to perceive those events later, how it's gonna replay them back, whether they have this blanket of shame, or they have this blanket of stress, or they have this blanket of overwhelmed, whatever it is that the person is giving you feedback to the experience that you're saying is really important and really impactful for then how you perceive that event.
You ever been telling someone a story and they're like, "Oh, I would have been so mad.
Yeah. And then you're
I
like,
would
I
have
should have been
been."
more mad.
And then you're like, "Oh man, I don't I don't think I was mad enough." And then you leave that
Stomp out of there.
experience more angry and you're like, "I gotta go get this person now because like I missed an opportunity to be so mad because like somebody else said that would have made them so mad." It didn't really make me mad, but now it does.
Yeah.
And that's literally the gift and the
Sometimes
curse
it
of
can
your brain.
Well, you can second guess it too. You can say like, I explained this situation and someone says like, "Wow, that's going to be really stressful," and like blah blah blah. Like this has happened to me a lot recently within a current situation of having to move out of my house, and having to figure out a lot of just like details in a short period of time. And people have said like, that's going to be so stressful. It's like, wow. And I'm like, well, it's like at the end of the day, it's an opportunity for us. This is my
I hate you.
life.
I literally hate you. You're the worst. I can't.
The worst.
Who could stand to be around you? It's just like, oh,
I don't know.
so
I don't know.
lucky. I'm
But
so
sometimes you do
lucky.
it, but like you have to check
Osmosis.
yourself. Osmosis,
Give
osmosis.
me that. Give me that.
But you have to check yourself, because when someone says like, "Oh, that's gotta be really stressful," or like, "I'm not finding out the gender of the baby," and people have been like, "I could never do that. That's so stressful. I'm such a control freak." And I'm like, well, it's not that. I'm too much of a prepared person. And sometimes I'm like, does that mean I'm not a prepared person? Like I've had to check that and say like, no, no, I reject that feeling. First of all, it
That's
doesn't.
yours, not
That's yours.
mine.
It doesn't feel stressful or not prepared for me, because at the end of the day, we are preparing for a baby. A baby's going to come out. Whether
Pretty
it's a
sure.
boy or a girl, pretty sure. So like whether it's a boy or a girl doesn't matter to me. It's not that big of an impact for me. It's not like I'm planning for a baby.
I'm
Like,
gonna get one too.
like,
I'm gonna
yeah,
cook one and I'm
like,
gonna get it.
so like the proceed, like I had to check like, oh, is this adding stress? Like I had to internalize and think about it for a minute, because I said like, oh, I don't want to add stress. But what if that means stress for them? But does that mean stress for me?
It's a good question. It is a very, very good question. And could it potentially mean stress for them? Because that behavior pattern is so practiced that almost everything means stress to them.
Mm,
And
immediate.
that's where your knee jerk behavior patterns come in. And that's where you need to say, like, I do have some control over. my
Well,
reactions.
that's the thing is the control because of something that I read once is like your knee jerk reactions is not we've historically been like that shows who you really are. No, that
No.
shows who you've practiced to be.
Yes.
So that doesn't mean that is who you are, and that doesn't mean that that's the true feelings or that's your true reactions. It doesn't mean anything. What it actually means is that's your practice behavior. So if your knee jerk is immediately going there and you can check it and create new ones, your knee jerk then will be different, but it will take time.
It's it they're all of the brain chemistry and scans show that it doesn't have anything to do with that that's the most correct response or that's who you really are. It's
Yeah.
just that's the deepest pathway.
Hmm.
That's it. That's all it is. So, all right. I think that we talked about and maybe convinced I convinced myself that venting is not the healthful um feel good, necessary activity that I once thought it was. In fact, it's very harmful. And I don't want to leave people without an alternative because sometimes things need to come out. They need to be talked through, they need to be verbalized. And there are ways that you can do this and do less damage to your brain and maybe the pathways of your knee jerk because it is appropriate to feel your feels. It's always going to be appropriate. If you are going to have a vent, maybe try some of these principles to see see how they feel. Just try them out. Try them out. See, number one,
Let's try some things out.
open and close with a positive.
Mm.
So before you launch into your vent session, you are going to commit to opening and closing with a positive part of this. It's a very small, you can still say all the things you want to say in the middle. It's a very small change. Um, I have to vent about my job right now. Okay. I'm going to open with a positive. Things have been going really, really well at work for me lately. I've been feeling so good about my contributions, but it was such a surprise to me. Or that's why it was such a surprise to me that my boss denied my vacation request. And then you can continue to vent about the injustice, right? That's usually what we're venting about, injustices, perceived injustices. And then you're going to end with, I really want to do something and speak to him and change this, but I am really thankful that I have the opportunity to speak to my boss and about this because I feel misheard.
Yeah.
Open and close with a positive allows you to be simultaneously building neuropathways. If you're going to do the damage that happens with venting and complaining, then at least do an equal amount of mindfulness, gratefulness, and exercise and positivity. You can still vent, you
I
just
love that.
balance it.
Well, I love that we are ending with also some type of action. If you have a problem and you haven't decided what your action points need to be, in my experience, if you're having some of these conversations where you are venting, I'm hoping that during those conversations, you're working towards finding a solution, even if it's not an exact, even if it's not a layout of like how you're going to handle it in the end. Usually at the end of those, don't you feel like I usually come out with an action plan just by saying it out loud? You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
okay, like I've said these complaints about this part of my relationship, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, well, all right, I think I'm going to talk to him about these couple of things. And I've kind of worked out what they are because sometimes you don't know. That's part of the
Sometimes you
conversation.
don't know. That's part of why we feel the need to verbalize
But
as
that
human
leads
beings.
with curiosity and looking for a solution. And that's where I think like that moves from venting because venting is really just complaining. Like where we can look at something with like there is this problem. I want to be real about this problem. I want to say what it is. I want to talk it out. I want to find what the nuance is. What am I actually feeling here? And how could I come up? What are some of the potential solutions that I could come up with? And that's why we talk to other people, right? Like we want to hear maybe some of the input that they have with some of that experience. And that's why I think the venting atmosphere is so damaging, because what we're looking for is to feel better. And if at the end of the day, we are venting to just complain, and that doesn't lead, scientifically, that doesn't lead to feeling better. We're not getting our needs met from that experience either. So if we're looking to speak to our friends or our coworkers or whoever about a problem, we should look to speak to them about a problem in a in a curious tone, where I want to speak about this problem because I want your input. Your input is important to me. You're my friend, you're whatever, and I want to hear maybe another perspective or some ways that another brain could help come up with a solution for me, because I'm a little lost and I'm sad or I'm angry.
Ah, there is where venting turns into productivity. And that is where we make the shift into this being a productive thing for your brain and not something that is just shrinking it, sending cortisol hits, and not actually accomplishing getting that need met of feeling better. That's the difference maker. You must have a purpose for your vent session. So before you start on one, take a breath and say, what is my ideal outcome when I finish verbalizing this? What do I want to happen? Because so often, what we are actually looking for is to share our human experience. We
Mm.
want to be heard. And there are so many studies that point to the fact that people use negative experiences to relate to other people.
More often
And
than positive experiences.
yeah, more it's easier and it
You can
is.
see this in any place that you go. I'm sure people are kind of like nodding along, because you think about, you go into a break room or you go into some of these places and you see people are talking and they're connecting, and like usually it's over something they feel angry about, or they
Yep.
feel like they're complaining about. It's the atmosphere that's been created in so many different facets, like whatever it is that you're doing. Like often times moms connect around like, I'm so tired, I'm so overworked, I'm so unappreciated. These things, like I just rattled them off. Like like it oftentimes, so that's how we're connecting with others.
You have to watch how you connect with others because these connections have a cost, and they are, and it's not to say that you shouldn't be looking to connect with others, but when you are starting into a complaint or event or any kind of grievance, if you simply ask yourself, what are you hoping to fulfill here with this, you might more often than not come up with the fact that you are simply trying to get someone's feedback. And if that's the case, you should open with that.
Yeah.
I really value your opinion and I want your feedback on this. If that is your end goal, great. If you if you can't find your end goal, I don't know what I want out of this. I just want to blah. I just want to word vomit this. I just want to complain. Then you might look to say, I'm really wanting to relate anger with someone else to make sure I'm not the only one feeling this way. And in that case, maybe you open with, I need to know that I'm not the only one feeling this way. And if that's the case, then that's okay. But just understand that opening with both a positive and a negative there to remind yourself that you may not be the only one feeling this way, but there are a lot of other positive things that are happening for you, can help to not deepen those pathways either.
Yeah. I wanted to add too, because sometimes I'm not looking for necessarily feedback from another person, but I'm looking for the space to be heard so that I can hear some of my thoughts. And the ways that I've done that is like I'm not necessarily looking for advice right now, but I want to talk this out. I want to like talk this situation out. So I'm hoping you can hear it. And a lot of times when I've done that and just like allowed it to flow, I've come out with my like action points.
Mhm.
But by just because sometimes you just want to hear, you don't necessarily need them to be like, so what you need to do next is. Um, Sometimes you just need to like hear what you are thinking, what you've said, your experience, and then you come out and you go like, okay, I think I know what to do now.
Yeah, but I know this. I do the confessional.
Yeah,
That's why I do the
yeah.
confessional. I have to
You
say
do
it out
it.
loud.
You do it. It in the shower. If you guys don't know, Rachel, Rachel is she'll sit in a room and talk out loud.
Out
I
loud.
never do that.
That's why you have to talk to somebody about it, but
Yeah.
I skip over that step because 'cause I've already said it to
She
myself.
just
I've already heard my own argument, and I've said like, "Okay, yeah, that makes sense," or it doesn't, as I'm in a room alone.
And she's found her son also is in a confessional.
Yeah, he also talks to himself, "Ah, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." Um, and my last piece of advice when it comes to having a vent session or complaining is lean it out, guys. Lean it out. We don't need to list every grievance that's ever been from this person, okay? Make it specific.
Yes.
Lean out the
And
rest.
like what are the ones when she's saying lean it out, like there are ones that are like grievances that we need to talk it out. We got to find a solution. But some of them we need to let go. Like
Let it
I was
go.
just listening to one from, from another person about laundry and I was like, we got to let this go. Is this a 6-month laundry argument? Like we have got to let it go. Like it is not that important. Um but if everything requires that level of importance, if you're so practiced in allowing the stress to rise and allowing the cortisol levels to release with these small stressors, then something like laundry, it's really hard to let go because you're like, I'm so practiced in all of these things are in my list of grievances and I hold on to them and I can't wait to just like let them explode. It's harder to let them go because that again is practiced behavior.
That's what I mean by lean it out. We're not going through the last 6 months of reasons why you hate your husband. That's not leaning it out. We are taking a specific thing and we are not going to like use every detail of the story to and here's why. I'm going to tell you why. This is not just like, "Oh, I think this is best practice." Every single time that you retell the story, it is not um reducing aggression or reducing stress. There's studies to show this. It's actually just reliving it. Your
Yeah.
brain, remember, your brain doesn't know the difference, doesn't know the difference between the experience and hearing the experience.
I just
So
listened to a podcast
time,
on this.
every single time you say it in exact detail and you're like, and then, and then, and you're painting the whole picture. You're making me think I was there, first of all. And secondly, you're there in your mind again. So if it was hurtful and stressful the first time, it's going to be the second time, the third time, the fourth time. And the problem with this is that all of these are getting their own separate cortisol hits.
Yeah.
So be aware. If you want to air a grievance, do it not in maybe reduce the storytelling
Yeah.
and the 10 for exaggeration. That's just for me. I'm saying
That's
that for myself.
I'm gonna say so for myself. I want to tell you guys, I just listened to a woman talking about this with 9/11. It was a 9/11 experience, and she was a survivor of 9/11 and was speaking to and helping another survivor of 9/11. And she's gone on to become an extremely successful person. Obviously she's on this podcast talking about how we can move forward and some of the things, and she talked about this person that she had been a form of support for. They had this joint experience together, and he had taken a really different direction. He was in therapy talking about it all the time, and he you know his marriage fell apart. That just his life had gone in different directions. She said to him, you keep staying here. You keep telling the story and you keep staying here, and you're choosing at this point to stay here and to live in this spot. And the rest of them, everyone else around you, they're moving forward. They're trying to move on with their lives, and you're staying here. And he's like, well, I just keep talking about it in therapy. And she's like, and I think that's the problem. And don't get me wrong when I say this, because obviously uh, I promote therapy. I believe in therapy. I think it's a really good thing for a lot of people who and historically hasn't been available since mental health was so stigmatized. I think it's really good, but I think it becomes very harmful when we use it in that way, to keep retelling something and staying there, to keep just reliving it and not looking forward to, not look pushing for our solution or our tools or how we can move forward in the future. We're just staying in the same spot. We're just practicing over and over how we can stay in the same place. And ultimately, we're there to move away from that place, but we're practicing staying.
It's why, a really good therapist is an amazing, amazing tool. And a subpar therapist can be damaging because a
Yeah.
good therapist will gently lean you out of that direction. They will recognize when you are trying to relive an experience over and over and over and talk about it over and over and over, and they will steer you in different directions. I've had this personally happen to me in therapy where I was like, well, she's not even listening to this thing. But like, she listened to that story on day one, and I wanted to talk about it every day. Every day I wanted to talk about that same thing. And she just gently kept saying, like, we've heard that story. And now we're going to talk about this. And that is what a good therapist will do. And I totally agree with you. And all in all, you feel your feels, you guys. Feel your feels, but just know that they are building literally your brain and who you are and how you live. And each one of them has a cost.
Mhm.
So if you think about venting and complaining as taking money out of the bank, you better be prepared to make a deposit, or you better be prepared to say, nah, I'm saving. I can't right now. I can't afford to vent and complain.
I can't afford to limit my problem solving skills.
I need those.
I need those because
Problems
I
keep on
want to
coming.
feel better. I want to feel better at the end of, because there's going to be absolutely no shortage of things that happen in your life that you are unhappy with, or experiences that feel negative for you, or relationship problems that feel challenging. There's no shortage of any of those. It's not coming any easier. So we have to, if we're looking to live a happier, healthier life, we have to look to solve these problems, and we have to look to practice solving these problems instead of continuously building these negative pathways. And it is completely normal. It is something that people do a lot of times. And honestly, I would challenge everyone today. The average is between 15 and 30 complaints per day. I would challenge you to notice how many complaints you have in a day.
Just count them.
Just count them.
Keep like a loose tally.
And like, what are they? Are they worth the complaint tally? Like, for me, like, and you can judge all the same ones.
Absolutely.
Like, something like traffic isn't worth a complaint tally. There are things that are worth a complaint tally for me, but that's not one of them.
It's
It's not.
taking money from the bank. So if you're saying like, yeah, that's worth it to me, I really want this, then at least it's a choice. Everything needs to be a choice.
Yeah.
And that is when you really feel full power over your happiness and your life. And it's not all happening to you, it's happening because of you.
Love that. Take that with you. It's more power. It's so much more power. All right, guys, we love you.